Hello, everybody. How we all doing? Good to hear that you got a new doctor, Punky Gal. And also good on you for finding a therapist who can help you, like, overcome some behaviors that are helping, or they're, you know, preventing you from being as close as you want with other people. That takes hard work. I know, as somebody who goes to a therapist to help me with that stuff. It can be scary to get help, but very worth it. Hey, Trans Girl Jade. Hello, Salmon Moose. Hello, Zakina. Hello, BCC TV. I see you over in Twitch chat. Hello, KBS. Trying to contain wife rage over the Game Awards. Ooh, I haven't watched those. I heard it was kind of scummy, but that's also not surprising. It's the video game industry. Yo, G. Klein! That sounds like a good-ass time. Hey, Jennifer Holly. Good luck with those last 17 minutes. They're the hardest. Too many ads and Alan Wake won a lot. I need to play Alan Wake. That's a game I feel like I should play on stream. Like, I should play, like, the remake or remaster and then the second one. I really, really liked Control. Oh. Hello. Hello, Twitch. Hello, YouTube. Hello, riverboat.gg. Control was a banger. Playing Silent Hill 3? Hell yeah. Hey, Stout Man. So today, again, gonna be a short stream, but I might stream later tonight as well. Just as a heads up. Wait, why would... I thought Baldur's Gate 3 won, like, all the things. Hey, Erica. Yeah, Forza Motorsport has been doing real good with accessibility options for a while now. Also, y'all, we are enjoying the amazing beats of Chillboy Beats. Y'all, please go give him a subscribe and a like. Amazing work. I mean, to be fair, aren't there like 15 awards at the Game Awards? Like, there are not that many, right? Hey, Banui. Haven't seen you in a hot minute. Late night gaming? Maybe. But today, just wanted to say howdy. I was able to pick up my car today thanks to all you fine folks, and I really appreciate it. They also told me that apparently I need to get my some part of my brakes replaced. I'm not entirely sure what, but that it would cost me like $800. But I asked them if it was like, if I drive this car away, if I drive this car out of here today, am I going to die? And they're like, no, you could get that done in like, I don't know, a year or two. And if you feel like your brakes are super spongy, then you can bring it back to us. It wasn't the brake pads. Because the car is like 17 years old, apparently the hydraulic system for the brake fluid has yes, Salmon Moose, it was the discs. The discs are leaking like the hydraulic fluid for the brakes, but it's not like it's shooting out geysers or anything. It's just that the seals around the discs have kind of like degraded over the march of time and need to be replaced. So, yeah, that's calipers. Okay. It is a repair I do need to get done, but I feel like I can get given how the brakes currently feel to me, I think I can get away with doing it in like a year or 6 months or so. It like I'm able to drive that car no problem. It is not a manual. I'm not cool enough to drive manual. Discs don't have hydraulic fluid. They showed me a diagram for a different car, but said the design principles were basically the same, so I might have gotten confused with the other car they were showing me in the diagram. Hey, Distron. But nice to know I drove my car home. It went fine. The tires make such a big difference. It just felt like a much more solid ride. So, and I'm still alive. Yeah. If you're getting the oil changed on a regular basis, and you will be, right, they'll check the brake fluid levels. Yeah, exactly, KBS. That's basically what the mechanic told me, because both the lady at the front desk and also had a mechanic there, and they were able to kind of tag team explain to me some stuff. And if it doesn't use copywritten music, I would be happy to show it on stream, Zakina. No, it has like a brake fluid system, Erica. So something's making the brake fluid leak. It's like a loose seal somewhere. So yeah, we'll just be we'll be saving up on the streams, and hopefully in 6 months time, $800 we'll be able to do that. The fluid is what does the squeezing? Yeah. We'll see, Zakina. I've been getting like some automated claims. The reason we moved away from using synth video game music covers, we started getting some copyright claims, not copyright strikes, mind you, but copyright claims for songs that used melodies that were too close to like Majora's Mask and Ken's theme from Street Fighter. Yeah, the DRM system can claim like musical similarity. So that's fun. Hey, Dark Canuck. Hello, Quasi Spec. New tires feel so damn nice. Yeah, especially considering the ones I was driving on were literally over a decade old. See if you can find non-copyright music. That's what I've been playing. Chill Boy Beats gives full permission as long as you credit them. So, same with Slam House. Thank you, KBS. I appreciate it. And KBS's theme goes da 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 da. Oh, wait a minute. KBS's theme sounds exactly like a different theme. How y'all doing, folks? Also, VCC TV, how you doing? You looking a little cozy? Do they not flag that shit when you get it inspected? Do they not flag which? Can you not play games because you'll get copy struck? Distron, it's the YouTube copyright system is just dumb as hell. If I play certain games, they will claim the revenue on videos, which is the DRM, not DRM, the copyright claims. But copyright claims are not copyright strikes. Does that make sense? The copyright strike is what like eventually kills YouTube channels. Copyright claims just divert revenue. And honestly, for the most part, I'm fine with people doing copyright claims. Especially if they're valid for like things like using a similar theme or something.
Catalina, I just had a great idea for an SCP. The game that plays you. You put the disc in and you see a guy sitting with a controller, and then you start killing everyone around you.
Why would the game want to kill everyone around you? I feel like if a video game was playing you, it'd be like you'd basically be like a sim. I feel like that'd be way more horrifying. I've been sitting in a room without a door for 5 days now. There's a bathroom in the corner, but I can't get up and use it. So I've shat my pants over and over again. Do. For some inexplicable reason, I've climbed into a pool and the ladder disappeared. I can't get out. The ledge is right there, but I can't get out. Too much shit, yeah. All right, so I'm going to take you guys down my little mental rabbit hole, okay? So as I was driving around today doing errands, I turned on a Vosh stream, right? As you do, as you do. And he was talking about vacancy taxes, which are like something I've known about for a while now, but hadn't really put too much thought into, right? And as I was driving around, there are parts of Minneapolis where there are lots of like vacant buildings or predominantly vacant apartment buildings. There are like sections of the city where like storefronts have just been vacant for multiple years now. Basically, kind of to summarize the issue, sections of the city would gentrify, and then would basically the gentrifying businesses like Apple or whatever would pull out of these areas, and now those areas have just kind of become desolate wastelands, mostly because the rents in the buildings that used to house like the Apple store aren't going down. So businesses like a smaller business can't just come in and rent that storefront because they're charging Apple store prices, and nothing that is able to pay Apple store prices wants to open up there again, right? So this has kind of been like an issue where these investment firms or retail space owners will just sit on the spaces for years and years in order to try and recapture that the glory days of gentrification. They want line to go up, and while they would make like smaller amounts of income off of like a shorter term lease, they want to be able to jump on those opportunities if they come up, right? And so it's kind of their version of like a speculative investment, right? Like they sit on the business and just kind of like wait for, I guess, the entire community to collapse or for a wealthy storefront to come in. And they can't go for less rent because that would devalue the property and lessen how much they can borrow against it. Yeah, so there's like a perverse incentive system for once an area is gentrified to continue reaching for that gentrified business, even if it's not forthcoming. And that means like there are just sections of the city where like you look at all four corners of the street, and for those of you who don't know, like corner front businesses are in cities are like, you know, they're known as anchor stores, essentially stores that kind of build the character of a certain intersection location, right? They're the most important businesses. But there are some key intersections in pretty like populated areas that are just empty and have been for years, right? And you know, part of me has been thinking like, what do you do, right? Like in this situation, what do you do? What policies can you enact? And hearing Vosh talk about vacancy taxes was like, damn, that would probably work. And I wanted to know more about kind of the history of vacancy taxes and the efficacy of vacancy taxes, because like it can sound like a good idea on paper, but maybe there are like certain elements I don't know about that make vacancy taxes just not work. And so I looked a bit into it, found a few things we can go over, and yeah, we'll go from there. I think you guys will find it very interesting where we end up when talking about vacancy taxes. Now, I know that a lot of you might be like, taxes? What? Yeah, we're doing a little bit of a research stream. A little bit of I'm pulling you down my research rabbit hole, okay? Yes, that is the other thing. It is hard to enforce vacancy taxes, Sam and Moose, due to like needing to prove whether or not a property is being used or occupied. However, I think it's easier with retail space. So that one point is it's easier to tell if those places are being used when they're retail, and two, it's that I think that there are ways we could better enforce vacancy taxation when it comes to apartments, condos, etc. Housing, like standalone houses, I think it's much harder to kind of verify whether or not people, it's occupied 5 months or 6 months out of the year. But yeah. Yeah, so like privately owned homes where people aren't living there full time, that's harder to identify. But like when it comes to condos or condos or apartments, I think we have a little bit more wiggle room. Send a letter to that address with a form asking them to reply within a month. Let's see. IRS agent field trips. Well, yeah, that is something more IRS agents would be able to enforce, There are areas with 30% vacant houses in Australia. God damn. So this is a tax on building owners leaving business spaces empty. So Archangel, it's twofold. There are two types of vacancy taxes that I'm interested in looking into, right? Number one, a vacancy tax applied to storefronts and retail space. And I think this is important because it provides, I think possibly, especially if there's a mechanism to like escalate the taxation rate over time on these retail spaces, which I think is fair for a space that is meant to have businesses that cater to communities, like a year-by-year increase of like 1% or 0.5% for a vacancy tax, right, on a business space, in order to facilitate like it being a business. And the more that place costs them to stay vacant, the more incentive they have to fill it with some kind of retailer. And I think that provides a mechanism to de-gentrify areas in a way that can be healthy and not economically apocalyptic, Especially if, it's like, exactly, Archangel Decab, there are a lot of places where gentrification has just upped the tax, upped the valuation and therefore the tax rate of a lot of businesses, but there's not really a mechanism to decrease that tax rate after the fact, right? Or provide an incentive for these retail spaces to rent out to lower profitability, lower prestige businesses, like local startups, for example. Anyway, that being said, that would be the first kind, right, on businesses. The second would be a vacancy tax on housing, essentially trying to combat and limit this idea of, we're just going to have this vacant condo and we're going to rent it out, a handful of times per year as an Airbnb. And like there was a problem, like this problem got to the extent where like entire apartment complexes would effectively be operating as off the books hotels, as Airbnbs, and as part of the way to kind of combat this, you could have a vacancy tax in order to like increase the pressure to rent these out to tenants, right? Additionally, banks, for example, will like sit on homes in order to without doing anything. There was a home in the neighborhood where I grew up where it was a single family home, and the bank like bought it or repossessed it, and then it sat vacant for like 10 years. Became known as like the creepy vacant home, and like there's no reason for that. It's just being held as like a little just being held as like a little kind of vessel for value. So let's see. I wonder if that would cut back on landholders wiggling out of taxes by writing properties off as a net loss. Yeah, well, part of it is also that then cities can because primarily if nobody's living in a place, right? The amount of tax that you get from that place goes down. Like if there's no business there, if there's no one living there, then there's less taxes to cover the expenses of a given city, town, whatever. So this is also a way to keep like local governments running, while kind of increasing the pressure to turn these empty spaces into something that is not empty. Especially in cities where like space is at a premium. So those are kind of the two things. I think like a business vacancy tax and a housing vacancy tax would operate probably on two different axes, despite having similar concepts. Hello, Ukrainian. So that is kind of where my head's at today. So a lot of this a lot of the conversation here seems to have stemmed from Vancouver in British Columbia, right? Basically, I think 5 years ago in 2018 or 2017 sent vacancy tax. And this vacancy tax essentially is supposed to reduce speculation and vacancy when it comes to property and space. And specifically, this one is designed for vacant homes. It's designed to increase the home rate, that the housing rate. God, my brain. The housing rate in British Columbia. And as you can see, this tax is an annual tax that applies based on how property owners use their residential property, the property owner's residency status, and where property owners earn and report their income. Basically, your tax rate when it comes to vacancy depends on where you are, what you do with it, and where you are earning your income, because all three of those things can be very different and lead to very different impacts on the local community, right? So this seems like a pretty solid thing, right? All registered owners of residential property in a designated taxable area must complete a declaration each year to declare their residency status and how their property has been used unless a special circumstance applies. You have to declare each year because your circumstances may change during the year. And if you do not complete a declaration, you will need to pay the speculation and vacancy tax at a minimum rate of 2% of your property's assessed value. So again, the 1%, 2% rate that is being talked about here is of the assessed value. So if you live in a very high value area, that could actually work out to be a significant chunk of money, which would lead people to be like, well, is it better for us to just let this sit vacant and be charged X amount of money, $2 million, let's say, or is it better for us to just rent this out, even if it's to less than market value, to save that $2 million plus you earn income from a tenant, right? Or you sell it. this seems like, to me, this seems like a solid framework to kind of like get a foothold in, like get a basic understanding of the premise. I wrote a post the other day on Reddit where a landlord said his property taxes went up, so he was going to raise his tenant's rate because they're paying his mortgage. Well, yeah, that's what landlords do. However, generally speaking, and this comes down to why getting involved in local politics is so important. A lot of places have protections against landlords arbitrarily raising rent, right? Like a landlord can't just usually, and I'm not saying this is true in all cases, it depends on where you live, but usually a landlord can't just be like, oh, I just feel like raising the rent. You know, there has to be like a reason, there has to be an improvement to the property, etc., etc. Generally. But we are also seeing kind of a rise of tenants' unions, but we're not really talking about the issue of raised rent, because the issue that what we're looking at here is not raising rent or practices that would raise rent. When we're talking about 1 or 2% tax, vacancy tax or something like that, what we're looking at is a mechanism to reduce rent, or at the very least, be more proactive about renting, right? So this is about getting more people housed and making sure these spaces are used. So from a lot of the data that I looked at earlier today, there seems to be this idea that the results around Vancouver's vacancy taxes is mixed, right? So, like, went and found this article from the Vancouver Sun, published 2021, 2 years ago. 3 years in, has British Columbia's speculation and vacancy tax made a difference? Rental rates in Metro Vancouver have fallen recently but remain high, and housing prices continue to rise. Which is a good point to make here. It's that vacancy taxes probably aren't going to be like a panacea, right? It's not going to fix all of the problems when it comes to housing, but it can certainly be a way to implement a policy that can help, right? And the question is, how much does this policy help? Because a lot of the pushback I've been seeing seems to indicate basically like, oh, well, it didn't fix the entire housing market, so better roll it back. So let's just read a little bit of this. On the 3rd anniversary of British Columbia's adoption of a vacant home and speculation tax, the province says the tax has turned empty units into homes. But experts remain divided on its benefits and note it's hard to isolate the tax's exact effect on the supply and market of housing and rental stock. Now, this is going to be very interesting, right? I want you all to keep in mind experts remain divided on its benefits and note it's hard to isolate the tax's exact effect on the supply and market of housing and rental stock. This is going to be important specifically because later we're going to get to why it might be difficult to determine the exact effect on the market. So let's see if there's anything else we can pull out of this. The British Columbia Ministry of Finance, in a 22-page technical briefing two mayors made public Wednesday, points to Canada Mortgage Housing Corp figures that it says show the tax help. Again, you can kind of see the leadings of the Vancouver Sun here. Helped add 18,000 units to the long-term rental market in Greater Vancouver in 2019 and 2020 as investors repurposed their properties toward long-term rental and added newly completed units to the market. So basically what this is saying is that this report facilitated 18,000 more places for people to live long-term, and that is attributed towards, again, investors. So again, speculative investors who have just been sitting on properties, repurposing those short-term rentals into long-term rentals. To translate that, it's basically over the course of these 2 years, businesses that were operating shady Airbnb schemes had to repurpose their properties into long-term rentals because it was no longer feasible to use them as just like shady knockoff hotels. But it is also worth noting that it also includes newly completed units, so built into this. So the number of 18,000 might not be a direct result of newly added or completed units being added to the market. The tax was introduced in 2018 by Premier John Horgan's NDP government, in part as a response to escalating home prices in urban areas and low rental vacancy rates and high rental prices. It applies to all owners of empty homes, although foreign owners pay a higher tax in the Metro Vancouver, Victoria, Nanaimo, and Kelowna areas. Rental rates in Metro have fallen recently but remain high, and housing prices continue to rise. Tom Davidoff, an associate professor at the Saunders School of Business at the University of British Columbia, said it's difficult to isolate the exact effect of the speculation and vacancy tax, as there are other factors at work, including the City of Vancouver's vacancy tax and foreign buyers tax, also introduced about the same time. So what's interesting to note here is that British Columbia has a vacancy tax that applies across the entire province, but Vancouver has its own vacancy tax, right? So basically, what I find very interesting here is that this professor's like, well, there are other effects on the market, so it's impossible to tell exactly what's happening here. And that's true of all economics. like if you're doing more than looking at like supply, like a supply and demand graph that has like no other variables added to it, like that's true of all economic situations, right? So I find that very funny that this professor of business is like, well, it's hard to say. That's all economic questions. I think there was some effect, but it's hard to disentangle from everything else that goes on in the world. And yet, a lot of business professors and a lot of economics professors will tell you some pretty definitive things about very complicated economic issues. It's very strange that they're being so cautious on this one. I think on an annual basis going forward, what it does is keep stuff in the rental market, he said, which is that's the point. That's the point, is to open these properties up to being rentals so more people can live there. It's also possible that the tax provides incentives for the creation of more purpose-built rental housing. So basically using the tax money that you get from vacancy taxes to build more housing. Andrei Pavlov, a professor of finance at Simon Fraser University, takes a different view. He believes that the increase in rental units is tied to the premium price for new units in the market, units that haven't been subject to rent controls. The CMHC report noted that the average asking rent for vacant units was 21.4% higher than the average rent for occupied units in the metro. Pavlov said that the speculation in vacancy tax and other NDP housing measures are choking new housing starts, pointing to a recent drop in building permits in the metro area. So basically, he's trying to say that new building is being curtailed by these vacancy taxes because the builders don't want to sit on an empty building in order to try and turn over those units at a lower price. Pavlov says the tax can devalue a new housing asset because it reduces flexibility in its use and can also reduce other government revenues, such as from the property transfer tax. The way to increase affordability is to increase supply, said Pavlov, who specializes in risk management and for real estate investments, mortgages, and financial derivatives. And I just have to really point out, it's really ironic that there is absolutely no caveat to what he's saying here. The only, like, again, it's too the first guy, it's too complicated to say anything for sure. But then Pavlov is just like, the way to increase affordability is to increase supply. Also, by the way, I specifically work in risk management for real estate investments, i.e. my job is to preserve the value of real estate investments. So yeah, you know, my job is to talk about how we can preserve that value. No wonder he's saying it's a bad idea. So I don't know. This is very funny to me, right? But I want to compare and contrast this article and what it says here with this other one I found from Stories. Amount of vacant homes in Vancouver down 36% due to empty homes tax. The empty homes, and this is from last year. So this is a year after the story we just watched. The empty homes tax is doing what it was designed to do, the city of Vancouver said on Friday, as it published an annual report for the 2021 vacancy reference year. The empty homes tax first came into effect in 2017. So in British Columbia, it was passed in 2018. In the city of Vancouver, it was passed in 2017. And the city says that as the tax is reaching the end of its 5th year, the amount of vacant properties in Vancouver is now at 1,398, which is 36% less compared to when it was first implemented. The city says that 1,755 residential properties were identified or declared as vacant in 2020, but 49% of those have become occupied in 2021. So that's pretty cool. The city also highlighted rental market data from the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation that showed the rental stock has continued to increase every year, with over 5,900 units added in 2019, 2,455 added in 2020, and 615 added in 2021. And you might be like, oh, well, why were so many fewer units added in 2020 and 2021 than in 2019? Can anyone think of a reason why? What might have happened in 2020 and 2021 that might have led to a decrease in investment of building new units? I like some kind of global again, a lot of the answers here are just going to boil down to, like, if anyone's like gives you a time period that includes like the COVID pandemic and is like, wow, look at what happened, it clearly must be the result of liberals or something like that, or clearly must be the result of socialist leftists. The answer is probably going to be COVID. We have not talked about that yet in Midnight and All Night, but we'll get there. So I just find this very interesting, right? Revenue from the tax was $39.1 million in the tax's first year, $41.2 million in 2019, $37.9 million in 2020, $27.8 million in 2021, and $68.8 million in 2022. Tax revenue decreases, such as that from 2019 to 2021, are often viewed as a negative, but in the case of the empty homes tax, it's an indicator that the tax is doing what the city was hoping it would when they created it, which is decrease the amount of vacant properties in the city. Yeah, like, so this is really cool, right? I think this is a like kind of like a almost like a there's no real argument against this that I can find. Like, some of the arguments against vacancy taxes are just silly, and we'll get to them in a moment. But like, on the one hand, the city gets a new source of revenue, and on the other hand, that revenue can be funneled into renting, building more rental units, building affordable housing, etc. And also, like, if it goes down, that's a good thing. Like, so either you get tax revenue that can be used for more good things, or you get more space that is actually being used by real people as opposed to just being sat on as a speculative investment. I feel like their arguments will be they get less money. Kind of, yeah. Let's see. Also, this is important. The tax rate was increased from 1.25% for the 2020 vacancy reference year to 3% the following year, hence the substantial increase in revenue in 2022. So basically, they more than doubled the tax rate in 2022, right? When it comes to vacancy, which I think is a good thing, right? And on top of that, there is now a push to raise it from 3% to 5%. And I feel like having an escalating scale, right? Like, 1% the first year, 2.25% the second year, 3%, like some whatever sliding scale you want to use, 3.5% the year after. I think that would also be good because it allows for people to have a little bit more wiggle room before they get hit by a flat, 5% vacancy tax, right? Gives you some time to like turn over a property or repurpose it for longer term use. I haven't seen many studies on just kind of like escalating vacancy taxes, but that would seem to make sense to me. That it would be like a decent way to move forward with vacancy taxes. Let's see. Now, what's interesting here is that while the 5% plan was going to be implemented this year, the Vancouver City Council actually voted to stop the plan to increase it from 3% to 5%. Which is why I think maybe like a sliding scale over a set amount of time to 5% might be more effective. That might be more palatable to people than just a flat 5% as soon as it's declared like vacant, right? So Vancouver's council votes to stop planned increase empty homes tax from 3% to 5% of assessed value. Also voted to give millions back to developers who have vacant units in new buildings, which I don't agree with either of this. Like, if you're building a new building, maybe you should lower the rents so that you can fill up that building. Maybe your priority should be filling that building instead of just like sitting there and trying to hold out for every tenant to be paying your imagined property rent value. Who is buzzing me? A lot of new buildings aren't fit for humans to live in. Yeah, right? So this is interesting. We'll go into this a little bit. A planned increase of Vancouver's empty homes tax has been halted by its new city council in a move recommended by staff and supported by the ruling ABC Vancouver party, but criticized by opposition councillors. In a 7-3 vote, councillors voted to keep the annual tax at 3% of a home's assessed value rather than increase it to 5%, as approved by the previous council in April of 2022. At the time, they asked staff to come back with a report on future rate increases and ways the tax could be modified to improve its fairness. In their report this month, staff said an analysis of how the tax worked at 3% was inconclusive and warned that the increase to 5% might lead to more people trying to circumvent it. Which again, a lot of the wording around this I find very interesting. An increase to 5% might lead to more people trying to circumvent it. Oh, you mean more people might try to break the law? More wealthy people might try to break the law? God, if only there was some sort of mechanism that, I don't know, would punish someone for breaking the law. But we all know that system is only in place for people who steal candy bars. Like, Like yeah, no, the issue here is just is very interesting. Like, oh, people might try to scam their way out of paying millions of dollars in taxes. Darn, if only there was a way, some sort of mechanism to I don't know, keep law and order and justice, even if those people were wealthy. I don't know, just ideas here. 5 might yield more reports, but it could lead to more fraudulent or tax evasion, false reporting. And so I think that continuing moving back to the 3% is reasonable, said Counselor Lisa Dominato. Which, goddamn, what a great last name. Terrible argument, but great last name. Exemptions for those unfairly caught. The tax was introduced in 2017 at 1% of a property's value, but has been slowly increased to 3% over the course of former Mayor Kennedy Stewart's term. Approximately $115 million had been raised over 5 years, with the number of declared vacant properties increasing from 1,010 in 2017 to decreasing from 1,010 in 2017 to 502 in 2022. So again, to really emphasize this, over the course of 5 years, they halved the amount of empty and vacant property in their city with this policy. And the funds had been used for various affordable housing initiatives. However, it had been the subject of various legal challenges, along with some people complaining that the tax unfairly targeted them, leading to staff proposing a variety of exemptions that council mostly passed unanimously. Those included delays in building permit and redevelopment approvals, properties vacant due to flooding or other disasters, or people who own a property primarily to access medical treatments in the city. So, couple of things, right? It makes sense, right, that if your building is empty due to like bureaucratic delays, that you don't get punished for that. If your property is flooded or there's a natural disaster, that makes sense to offer an exemption for that. People who own a property primarily to access medical treatments in the city seems to be a weird one, and I'm not familiar with the ins and outs of Canada's medical system. But like, I guess my question here is, why would you own the property you are using to access healthcare? Why would you not rent the property that you're using to access healthcare? Because it seems like if you're buying a house in the city in order to access medical care, that seems to be a huge flaw in like the healthcare system that you have going on, right? That should absolutely be addressed. But like, I don't know that this necessarily would be like I mean, again, like, if you don't want to pay the tax, you don't have to own. You can just rent. Well, yeah, but that's the thing, Sam and Moose. Like, why would you have to own the house in the city? Why wouldn't you? Why couldn't you rent a place in the city? I guess is my question. I think the ownership issue is my question. But putting that aside, I think that primarily, like, if we're talking about people who just like are trying to use a loophole in like the healthcare system in order to get healthcare, I'm also fine with that. It's just, I think maybe that loophole should include rented properties so that owned properties aren't being used in that way, if that makes sense. Dialysis and chemo, so you don't have to deal with a landlord for a house you don't spend all your time in. But you wouldn't need to deal with a landlord? You just pay the landlord like you'd pay a mortgage? In all of these things, I fully advocate for a second house because it's not people with 2 homes that are a problem. Yeah, but that's the thing, right? Like, that's why I'm interested about the wording here. Because if it's just somebody who owns like a small shack in order to like go to the city, right? Or even like a family home. Okay. That's something that probably shouldn't have to exist in the system and is symptomatic of like systemic failures. But I get that. This is more targeted towards larger lenders and speculative investors. So I get that. But I guess surely it must be cheaper to rent than to own the home. That seems weird to me, but okay. Okay. It was a new tax 4 or 5 years ago, and so a number of the changes that are proposed are being responsive to what we've heard are some gaps in the system. However, one new exemption was controversial and became more so after an amendment by an ABC Vancouver councillor. Staff recommended that new developers be exempt from the tax until they are sold to buyers so that developers aren't forced to pay additional fees if the housing market is slower than anticipated when their projects are available to the public. Oh, okay. Yeah, no. These ones I can understand an argument for, okay? Those first three I understand. This one, like, oh, well, we should be protected if the housing market is slow. Bitch, why? Why? If I open a store and, my store is selling apples and I buy a bunch of apples and the apple market is just lower that first week and suddenly my apples are going bad, why should the state give you a pass for that? For me, why no, drop your rental rates. Oh, well, we can't find enough people who are willing to pay the premium on our wonderful new development. Okay, well then drop your prices. Supply and demand. Charlie, thank you for the $10 super chat on YouTube. I appreciate it, and thank you for being the first person to support stream today. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get over the idea here that, like, well, we shouldn't be forced to pay a tax if the housing market is slow. Why? Why not? You're the ones who you built the building as an investment. Sometimes investments aren't guaranteed. That's why they're called investments. The tax is literally against speculative investments that rely on vacant housing. No, exactly, Winby. This is what people talk about when they say, privatize the gains, socialize the losses, right? Yeah, like I have zero sympathy for this, and they should not be getting money back. Staff noted it was the same rule the province had for its vacant homes tax. And Mayor Ken Sim framed it as making it easier for Vancouver to meet its supply goals by doing more to support development. They can build anywhere, and I think anytime No, they can't! They can't build anywhere! What are you talking about? You issue the permits for them to build! What are you talking? They can build anywhere. No, they can't! That's not how that works. What oh yeah, they can build anywhere, so they're going to go and build it in the middle of rural Canada? No. And I think anytime we create another punitive thing, a penalty out of their control, it just sends a signal that Vancouver is not receptive to building more homes. He said, that's not the signal there. you can still build the homes. The issue is you might not be able to charge the premium amount that you want to for them. If there's a way to not get punished by this, and that is by lowering the rent so that more people can afford to move in. However, Councilman Mike Klassen introduced an amendment that would make the new rules retroactive to 2022, which would eliminate $3.8 million in expected revenue this year, forcing the city to give back $2.4 million it had already collected. In the grand scheme of things, it's a relatively small amount of money that will help keep the costs down for those who are purchasing or occupying these buildings. How does it keep the cost down for people who are purchasing or occupying the buildings? It's not doing that. It's keeping the costs down for the people who held on to the buildings. It's doing the opposite. It also sends a signal that we want more people to be working at the city of Vancouver to build more housing, create more affordability, and create more supply. Opposition councilors disagreed. I am actually sort of stunned. We are proposing basically returning millions that have been collected for a bylaw that was understood, said Christine Boyle. I'm almost speechless, which is uncommon for me. It's like a reverse Robin Hood tax, which I love that turn of phrase, because a reverse Robin Hood tax is just stealing from poor people. That's what a reverse Robin Hood would be, right? That's just theft. Oh my god. Oh god. Yeah, so this silliness going on around this. But I do find it interesting that even in Vancouver, where they're like, no, we're not going to do a 5% tax. We're going to do the conservative thing and keep a 3% vacancy rate tax. I find that fascinating, right? I find that extraordinarily fascinating when it comes to like policy, because even the conservatives note the positive benefits. Even the people who are like, oh, think of the poor investors. They're going like, well, it's just unambiguously been good, so we're going to keep it at 3% because we don't want to get rid of it entirely. So all of this is really interesting to me, and I wanted to know more about kind of the efficacy. Like, what are, like, when we look at like the studies that have been done on vacancy taxes, right? What's kind of the conclusion that we have so far? And I was really kind of shocked and interested to find that we haven't really done studies on vacancy taxes. You know, I wanted to find research on it. And so the research on vacancy taxes only really begins in 2020. Only like 3 years ago. And when I went and looked, right, this was like one of the oldest ones I found, just on like the modern market here. And the impact of taxing vacancy on housing markets, evidence from France. So let's just take a bit of a look at this study. Vacancy is a common phenomenon across developed countries. Policymakers seek to reduce vacancy as it is seen as a challenge to housing affordability, especially in large cities. Taxing vacant homes is becoming a more popular tool among lawmakers, and yet this instrument has never been properly evaluated. This paper provides the first evaluation of a tax on vacant housing. First, I develop a model to understand the mechanisms of vacancy creation. Then I use the quasi-experimental setting of the introduction of a tax on vacancy in France in 1999 to identify the causal direct effect of the tax on the vacancy rate. Exploiting an exhaustive administrative data set, which contains information on every housing unit in France from 1995 to 2013, I implement a difference in difference approach combined with a propensity score matching strategy. Results suggest that the tax accounted for a 13% decrease in vacancy rates between 1997 and 2001. The impact is especially concentrated in long-term vacancy. Results also suggest that most of the vacant units were turned into primary residences. So this is interesting. Wait, Matatiyahu, do you know something about El Sevier? I don't. El Sevier, maybe, if it's French. So in this first assessment, which, by the way, again, using an old data set, so this isn't even data from like, the 2010s or the 2020s. It's from 90s to early 2000s, primarily, because that's when you view the before the implementation of the tax and immediately after. And what's interesting here is that this is prior to the boom of like Airbnb, which made the problem of vacancy exponentially worse because it provided a new economic incentive to keep housing empty, right? So, interesting stuff. But even prior to the boom of Airbnb, this type of policy brought down vacancy rates by 13%, which I find very interesting. So let's take a quick look here. Vacancies in the housing market are a relatively common phenomenon across Western countries. In 2005, vacancy rates amounted to 10% in the Euro area and 12.7% in the US. While for economists some level of vacancy seems intrinsic to the way markets work, politicians and activists have criticized this situation, arguing that high vacancy rates are undesirable and need to be tackled to improve housing affordability. Indeed, access to housing has worsened in recent years, as suggested by the increasing proportion of household income spent on housing. Various interventions have been proposed to deal with vacancy, ranging from a tax on vacant housing to forced conversion into social housing. Assessing the effect of such interventions on the local level is crucial to understanding the role played by governments and local authorities in shaping property owner incentives in the housing market. In this paper, I exploit a natural experiment in order to identify the causal effect of taxing vacant housing. I assess the French context, where a tax on vacant housing was implemented in some municipalities in 1999. To my knowledge, this is the first evaluation of an introduction on a tax on vacancy, and the first time the administrative data is used for this purpose. I use an exhaustive administrative data set to measure vacancy rates, and I apply a matching difference in difference strategy to compare municipalities that were subject to the tax to those where the tax was not applicable. So basically setting up kind of like a control. Gabriel Cook, good luck on the treadmill. Okay. Yes. Demand for housing has been increasing in OECD countries in recent years as a result of net migration and reduction of credit constraints. Similarly, other demographic aspects have been pressuring housing demand, such as aging and a decline in average household size. In a context of low supply elasticity, which characterizes European countries, increases in housing demand tend to capitalize into higher prices. The situation is further exacerbated by a high population density, land scarcity, and rigid construction regulation. Moreover, due to the concentration of population in urban areas, housing markets tend to be tighter in large cities. It may seem paradoxical that the situation of increasing demand for housing and inelastic supply coexists with considerably high levels of vacancy in many European countries. It is crucial to understand why vacancy exists and whether it presents a market failure or an optimal outcome in equilibrium. Previous literature has identified market frictions as a primary source of vacancy. However, vacancy can also be a result of a rational decision of the owner, which is this is key, right? Because people who say housing is just a supply and demand issue ignore that there may be incentives for owners to not sell vacant housing, right? This is like a key component that is missing from a lot of conversations around housing. So I'm very excited to see it in this paper. For instance, in a context of strong tenant protection, such as in the case of the French rental market, an owner may prefer to leave an apartment vacant rather than to rent it if he fears rent default risk. Similarly, if the uncertainty about the evolution of house prices or rent is high, an owner may decide to wait before selling or renting and thus choose to keep the unit vacant for a longer period. The presence of frictional vacancy and inactive housing combined with a situation of tight housing markets can prompt governments to intervene to improve housing affordability. Notably, policymakers can try to compensate for the distortions caused by tenant regulation and the real option problem by taxing vacant units. And keep the phrase real option problem in your mind. As stated by Klein and Morietti in 2014, the presence of pre-existing distortions is one of the arguments that can justify the implementation of place-based policies. Moreover, focusing on vacancy reduction may be a faster and easier way to increase residential capacity than promoting the construction of new housing units. Because again, even if you build new housing units, you may still find kind of this perverse incentive structure that would lead owners of those new housing units to not rent them out for one reason or another. So this is very interesting to keep in mind while talking about this. Nevertheless, the benefits of reducing vacancy might go beyond redistribution purposes. Indeed, some empirical evidence suggests that empty housing may have other undesirable social consequences due to negative externalities. Firstly, concentrations of vacant housing or foreclosures tend to reduce the value of properties in the area, which, I mean, it gives several references here, but yeah, I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory. Secondly, the increase of the perception of insecurity has also been identified as a consequence of the concentration of vacant houses, which can lead to an increase in the delinquency rate and damage social cohesion. Therefore, the justification for government intervention to reduce vacancy comes both from the potential redistributive effect of using more intensively the current housing stock and from the reduction of negative externalities entailed by vacancy. So, again, some of this is basically pointing out that hey, if you have a bunch of vacant homes, that can lead to kind of this snowballing effect where people see vacant homes and their communities slowly eroding and they stop caring as much about their neighbors or keeping the street clean or stuff like that. They see the empty places as maybe a place to just kind of break into and hang out in. It's not that complicated, right? Governments have historically intervened in the housing market in a number of ways, but few have directly tackled the reduction of vacancy due to the limited set of tools available. The difficulty to define and measure vacancy, where there is no consensus as of yet, according to De la Morvones and Chanteuf, 2000, is another important challenge. Nevertheless, there have been some initiatives across OECD countries aimed at decreasing vacancy rates. The Netherlands has historically opted for decriminalizing squatting. Oh, dude. Okay, that's great. That was an idea I had not, I'm not gonna lie, I had not thought of. But yeah, that would be one way to decrease vacancy rates. You want to rent your building out? You want to rent that apartment out? Well, you better rent it out quick, otherwise someone's just going to squat in it, get squatters' rights, and all of a sudden it's theirs. In the US, local governments have enacted vacant property registration ordinances to keep a better account of vacant units. Owners are required to provide property maintenance notifications and are usually charged a fee at the time of registration. shilling 2009. I think that like on top of like local registration, right? I feel like if people are submitting tax forms, it should be pretty easy for the IRS to determine like a primary residence, right? Simon Pierre, thank you for the $2 Canadian super chat. Squatting is based. True. So I lost my train of thought. Sorry. As for the tax on sorry. Oh yeah, no, sorry. There, I found it again. The IRS should be able to determine who is and is like oh, you have a primary residence, right? So like I feel like, and I don't know this for sure, but like a more fully funded IRS would be able to pretty easily determine who's unlawfully listing their properties as being rented when they're not, you know? So again, this a lot of it reads to me like, oh, we just need to fund the IRS more. I kind of wonder, would that just make vacant landowners just hire core security if squatters do that? Well, again, imagine decriminalizing squatting and implementing a vacancy tax. So, like, yeah, I guess you could hire like security to prevent squatters, but also you're having to pay like a 5% tax on the value of the property every year that it remains vacant. Like, plus the value of like 24/7 security. Like I feel like again, these are tools designed to increase the rate of turnaround on these vacant properties, right? Yeah, like as a pincer maneuver. Like again, I think a lot of things when it comes to housing aren't there's not like a silver bullet that will solve it, but there are things that are just good policies that you could combine in a way that would significantly improve housing for people. And let's see here. As the interest on a tax on vacant housing rises, an increasing number of countries have implemented this policy. Since April 2013, municipalities in the UK can choose to charge vacant units with up to an extra 50% of the council tax payment, a tax on housing properties. Jerusalem has also implemented a kind of vacancy tax in the form of doubling Arnona, a municipality tax on property, for properties that have been empty for more than 6 months. To my knowledge, there are no studies evaluating the extension of the council tax in the UK, nor the Arnona in Jerusalem. In France, a vacancy tax called Taxe sur les logements vacants, or TLV, was introduced in 1999 in urban units of more than 200,000 inhabitants that had a substantial disequilibrium between housing supply and demand. The tax was then extended to other municipalities in 2006 and modified again in 2013. Although the policy has been in place for a long time, there's still no robust empirical study assessing its impact, which I find interesting since this policy has now been in place for over 20 years at the publishing of this study. You know, this study published in 2020. It's been going on for 20 years. There's been no study on it until this. But it's clearly proliferated throughout the entire country of France due to it being an effective policy. I can't French, it's true. Also, folks, I've been going for over an hour now. If you've been enjoying this or finding it interesting, please hit the follow button on Twitch, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, hit the like button on the YouTube stream, please, and consider dropping some subs or donos in order to help facilitate this program, because I couldn't do it without viewers like you. So this show literally brought to you by viewers like you. Was like number 1. I saw that Trans Girl Jade. I was very impressed. But Jack, you don't understand. If we fully fund the IRS, they might be able to successfully catch and prosecute more wealthy people and corporations for financial crimes. That's true. We only want our legal system to go after poor people. You know, if a poor person steals like $100, jail for life. If a wealthy person steals hundreds of millions of dollars, good on them. And that's how the American legal system works. Wait, you can see who likes and no, I can't see who likes and dislikes. I just saw that Trans Girl Jade like hit exclamation point like in the chat, like first thing before I even said anything. So I see chat. I can see chat. I can't see who does the little reactions, but I can see like the little reactions in the chat come up. Anyway, consider donoing and gifting subs to support stream because it helps me out a lot. Thank you. PhilosophyTube has done a plagiarism video too. This feels coordinated. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. Like H-Bomb knows like so many people, and it's pretty clear they've been talking behind the scenes about this upcoming video for a while now, so that would not surprise me. All right. Moving on. So we've gotten to the French vacancy tax here, the TLV. To my knowledge, the only attempts to assess the impact of a tax on vacant housing is the one conducted by Blossier 2012 in the context of France. He exploits the extension of the tax in 2006 to some cities to identify the effect through a propensity score matching strategy. He uses data from the national census, which provides data on vacancy every 9 years, and finds that the tax is ineffective in reducing vacancy rates. Unfortunately, the spaced frequency of the census data challenges the identification strategy. So basically, the author of this study is like, this guy Blossier did one in 2012, but didn't do it so good. The IRS is only allowed to use tax return information for revenue purposes and to tell Jack who's liking and subbing. True, Felipe. Desgranges and Wasmer, 2000, propose a theoretical model to assess a tax on vacancy in which equilibrium rents are determined as the result of a Nash bargaining equilibrium, I have no idea what that is, between home seekers and homeowners on a housing market with stochastic search frictions on both sides. In their setting, vacancy can result from a stochastic mismatch between by the owners who can maintain a bargaining power to fix higher rent levels by rationing stocks. In this context, taxing vacant housing units increases owners' incentives to rent their housing unit at a lower rent because it increases their opportunity cost to leave them vacant. Moreover, such policy should increase the home seekers' bargaining power on the housing market by allowing them to extract some excess surplus by exerting downward pressure on rent levels. So, yeah, this seems to be backing up the core argument and the core functionality of vacancy taxes, which is that it basically it increases the opportunity cost, meaning like usually in like traditional kind of economic thought, the opportunity cost of not renting a property is just that you are foregoing renting it and getting income from that property, right? So that's typically assumed to be enough of an opportunity cost when it comes to housing that people want to, sell or rent their homes out or units out or whatever. However, what is being put forward here is that cost, the opportunity cost, isn't high enough, and what a vacancy tax does is increase that cost, because now it's not just that you are foregoing rent, but you are also being forced to pay a percentage of the value of the property that you wouldn't otherwise have to pay. So by renting, you can eliminate that penalty and also get that taxable income. Nash equilibrium is a game theory thing. It sounded familiar, but I had to look it up. Gotcha. However, in their model, the possibility of owners voluntarily keeping their units out of the market is not contemplated. In this paper, I develop a theoretical model to better understand voluntary vacancy and the potential impact of a tax by introducing a participation constraint in the Desgranges and Wassemer 2000 model. In particular, I allow apartments to be inactive, and I assess how a tax on vacancy can affect the stock of inactive housing. The model predicts that a tax on vacancy will increase the number of open vacancies while reducing the inactive stock and rents in the short term. In official records, total vacancy is measured as the sum of open vacancies plus inactive stock. Given that the increase in open vacancies is smaller than the decrease of the inactive stock, the model also predicts a decrease in total vacancy. I empirically test these predictions by exploiting the fact that the tax on vacancy in France was introduced only in some municipalities. This allows me to apply a difference in difference strategy combined with propensity score matching. Construct a control group out of the non-tax municipalities that shared only one of the two criteria of the taxed group, and I weight them according to their similarity to the municipalities in the taxed group. Empirically test these predictions by... I already read that. The results suggest a negative and significant impact on the implementation of TLV equivalent to a decrease of 0.8% percentage points of the vacancy rate, which implies a 13% decrease in vacancy. So basically, using this model, and again, there could be flaws in this model, of course. Perhaps there are newer studies that discredit it, but using this model, which seems to me like it follows a pretty coherent and logical setup, he arrives at the conclusion, or they arrive at the conclusion, that there's a 13% decrease in vacancy, which is great. That's very positive. This result is robust to the use of different specifications. The change of the control group and several other robustness tests. I also find that the effect is 50% higher in municipalities with an initial high level of vacancy. My results contradict the ones of Blossier in 2012, which showed a limited impact on the tax in reducing vacancy, which isn't surprising given that Blossier's model relies on, outdated and incomplete data. So this 2020 study uses far more data over a far longer period of time. The effect is concentrated in long-term vacancy, which suggests that a tax on vacancy can indeed be an efficient tool to reintroduce housing units that had been unused for a long time into the market. Finally, I find that most of the vacant units seem to have shifted to primary residences, while I do not find any significant impact on new construction in the medium term. This is interesting, by the way, because it shows that the argument that, if you have a vacancy rate, no one will build homes, which is what we saw in the arguments against, a vacancy tax. No one will build new housing, which is what we saw in the Vancouver, the arguments for this Vancouver, against the Vancouver vacancy tax. Developers won't build new homes. But now we see, from one of the best studies done on it to date, that's not the case. At least not in the medium term. So maybe in the long term, maybe in I don't know. I wonder how he defines medium term here, but maybe in 50 years it could have a negative impact, but probably not. Probably not is my additional commentary. I don't see why it would in the long term. This paper also relates to the abundant branch of literature that empirically evaluates the impact of housing policies. One strand of the literature focuses on demand-side policies, usually housing allowances. Recent evidence shows that housing allowances have inflationary effects due to the low elasticity of supply in France, Lafayette and Leblanc, 2004, Fac, 2005, and Trevien, 2014, and elsewhere, Gibbons and Manning, 2006, Kangasharu, 2003, Susin, 2002. In particular, due to the short-term rigidity of the supply, part of the benefit from the government is directly shifted to the owner through an increase in price. Another strand of the literature investigates the efficiency of supply-side policies, such as subsidized construction. Several authors in the U.S. have assessed spillover effects from the low-income housing tax credits on property value, resulting in mixed evidence. As for the empirical evidence concerning vacant housing, the amount of research is scanter. In Cheshire et al., 2015, the authors identify the role played by urban planning on determining vacancy rates in local housing markets. They point out the net effect of two opposite forces at stake, an opportunity cost effect and a mismatch effect. Their findings suggest that restrictive local planning policies result in higher vacancy rates, meaning that the mismatch effect dominates over the opportunity cost effect. The paper is organized as follows. In section 2, blah, 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 blah. I feel like we got enough out of this that we can understand as lay people. Let's go quickly to the conclusion here. Conclusion: in well-functioning urban housing markets, vacancy can occur due to frictions in the search process or due to voluntary withholding of housing units. In large cities where the demand pressure on the housing market is high, vacancy can be problematic as it implies an inefficient use of housing stock. Policymakers have historically tried to reduce vacancy through different instruments in order to improve housing affordability in cities. This paper is the first attempt. Okay, I guess we don't have the full thing after the introduction and the abstract. But this was really interesting. Sorry. Author Mariona Segu. So she, they. I'm gonna go with they, just to be safe. They did a wonderful job. I think this is extraordinarily interesting. And yeah, these are just little snippets from the rest of the study here. Malachi, thank you for gifting a sub to the Ukrainian.
In French. Also thanks Salmon Moose for the sub.
Well, thanks for paying it forward, Malachi. Let's go. So we also have this study, which I wonder. No, I didn't save the article this came from. Basically, I was going through just kind of the conservative arguments against vacancy taxes. And I saw one that made reference to the Joint Center for Housing Studies of Harvard University publishing a piece in April of this year, right? Called Option Value and Storefront Vacancy in New York City. Erica Moskowski, Daniel Stackman. Right? Actually, I'm gonna try and find the article just because it was real funny. Vacancy tax efficacy. Here it was. It was the Construction Reporter. New Harvard study takes issue with vacancy rate taxes. So I was like, oh, well that's interesting. Let me just take a look at this real quick. Move to impose vacancy rates on building owners who allow store spaces to remain empty could come with unintended consequences. Now, this is talking about why vacancy taxes shouldn't be applied to storefronts. Various reports have indicated that building owners have often been willing to allow retail and commercial space to remain empty at any given time on the hunch that the same space may fetch a higher rent at some point in the future. As a result, some cities have either enacted or proposed vacancy taxes designed to penalize building owners and landlords who purposely keep spaces empty. The movement has even taken in residential space that is kept empty by owners, with voters recently in both San Francisco and Berkeley, California, approving taxes on vacant dwellings. In New York, such taxes have been proposed primarily for the owners of empty commercial space. Earlier this year, a bill was introduced in the New York State Senate that would impose taxes on the owners of vacant properties in cities of populations of 1 million or more. The argument behind the commercial vacancy tax movement is simple. A lack of retail activity in a building has the potential to adversely impact business and property values. Thus, owners who are allowing spaces to remain unused in still popular neighborhoods where other stores are easily being rented should be penalized. But the new GCHS study called Option Value and Storefront Vacancy in New York City contends that such measures, while decreasing vacancy rates, may also have the tendency to lower tenant quality. Not only that, but the study also argues that such a tax would most likely lead to a higher turnover of retail residents. And I just have to stop because I got to this paragraph and I was like, I need to look up this study because this is really funny to me. Right? The argument here is basically, oh, no, you shouldn't tax empty storefronts that are holding out for higher rents because poorer businesses might get in. Oh no, the horror. Local startup businesses might be able to afford storefront space? No. You mean local entrepreneurs might be able to rent storefront space for their single family business? No. No, the horror. The horror. Also, the second part there is very funny and telling. Such a tax would most likely lead to a higher turnover of retail tenants. So, we might be like, well, what is a higher turnover rate? Yeah, there would be a higher turnover rate because one of the reasons certain storefronts remain empty for so long is because not only do the people who own and lease out the store property like hold out for higher rents, they hold out for longer term rental agreements. So part of the issue here is that your average small business person might be able to handle like a year or two long lease, but they might not be able to commit their business to a 10 to 25 year lease, right? But businesses the size of McDonald's, Apple, they're able to handle leases that are that long. So what winds up happening is these storefronts stay empty because they're fishing for wealthier, larger businesses that can commit to longer term leases, right? And the argument here that like, oh, well, if you have a vacancy tax, they'll have to rent it out to smaller businesses who might not be around for as long. Yeah, that's the point. That's the entire point. like yeah. That is it functioning as intended, actually. So let's just take a look at this this report because I'm interested. We'll read this opening part and click and take a look through the full paper. Why do storefronts remain empty? From this is Option Value and Storefront Vacancy in New York City by Erica Moskowitz. Moskowski and Daniel Stackman. Why do storefronts remain empty for more than a year in some of the world's highest rent retail districts? Landlords with vacancies derive option value from two sources of uncertainty. First, increasing downstream retail demand may drive up market rents tomorrow. So again, to translate this, why are they sitting on empty storefronts instead of renting out? Because they're trying to force up downstream demand. You know, like the demand of tomorrow. Second, different tenants may have different willingness to pay for the same space, creating an incentive for landlords to wait for a particularly high rent offer. High move-in costs, such as search frictions and high contract dissolution costs for landlords, amplify this option value. We estimate the model parameters by matching quarterly vacancy rates, lease-up rates, and tenant exit rates from a comprehensive high-frequency storefront tracking service, combined with microdata on commercial leases. In a counterfactual exercise, we find that reducing the variance of the match quality distribution by 50% reduces long-run vacancy rates by 33% on average, while reducing the variance of the aggregate state's variable has almost no effect. Finally, we use the estimated model to quantify the impact of a retail vacancy tax on long-run vacancy rates, average rents, and social welfare. Vacancies would have to generate negative externalities of $18.72 per square foot per quarter, about 30% of average rents, to justify a 1% vacancy tax on assessed property values. So basically what this paper is trying to argue is that, oh, well, you'd have to evaluate all of the negative externalities of leaving the business vacant, and it would have to hit $18.72 per square foot in a given quarter of the year in order to justify vacancy taxes. No. Also, fuck you. like, how about you just rent out your empty space? And if you don't, you pay the tax. This is very. Let's just take a quick look. This is from November 16th of 2023, so very recent. Click here for most recent version. That is this version. Okay. How long is this? This is 56 pages long. We're not reading all of it. How long is the intro? Maybe we could read through that. Couple pages. Let's just go through quick. Let's see, why do they forgo quarterly rents of $50 or even $100 per square foot? Manhattan average vacancy spell between 2015 and 2019 lasted 16 months, and only 50% of vacancies were filled after 1 year. We built an estimate, a structural model of storefront leasing, test possible reasons why rents do not adjust more quickly. Okay. But we know why they don't adjust more quickly. It's because it's similar. It's similar, by the way, to the business model of places like Uber, right? Which is where you come in and you just have such a massive cash bank that you are able to wait out your competition. Your small independent competition, you're able to wait them out. Okay. Just go to the conclusion. All right. Oh, the conclusion is so much shorter. Oh my god, the conclusion. In this paper, we leverage novel data to begin to understand the key market forces that drive long-run retail vacancy rates and rents. We show the asymmetry of landlords' and tenants' ability to commit to long-term leases, combined with tenant heterogeneity and upfront moving costs, search frictions, create option value for different market participants at different times, and that this option value fluctuates with the business cycle. We use our model to investigate the potential impacts of commercial vacancy taxes as much discussed urban policy. We view our work as a starting point for future work on the dynamics. Okay, so basically they're coming down and saying, basically you need to be incurring negative costs for the local community in order to justify a 1% vacancy tax. However, one of the things that would be interesting, or I would like to point out about this whole negative externality of an X amount, is that there's no way to fully calculate the negative externalities, right? Because one of the negative externalities would be what other businesses might be able to operate in that storefront that could generate positives for the community. So when you're allowing these storefronts to stay vacant, you're taking away the opportunity to generate positive net good for the local community. So this seems to be mostly like ignoring pretty key components of what the calculation is, Because just as there's an opportunity cost for not renting something out, there's an opportunity cost for that part of that opportunity cost is to the wider community, because the wider community is missing out on by allowing that behavior part of the opportunity cost is borne by the local community that is allowing that space to remain vacant as opposed to used for something that is productive in the local area. There we go. I think I rephrased that properly. So all of this is very interesting, right? And having looked into it, or at least having looked into a couple of the studies here, I think I can come to the conclusion that vacancy taxes are pretty good, actually. The quibbling seems to be mostly on to what degree do you do a vacancy tax. 1% seems to be like a good starting point with room to kind of move forward from there. I think that probably you want to get to something like 5%. But I think that there is room for like a sliding scale of like the longer you leave this place vacant, the more vacancy tax you pay, right? And so I think that would be a way to go with it that most people would find acceptable. Like, I think even conservatives could get behind the idea of a vacancy tax that, you know, year 1, it's 1%, year 2, it's 2%, year 3, it's 3%, etc., right? You can use that tax revenue to do good things in the community that help facilitate more housing. You can do things with the storefronts now that are generating revenue and like doing business and being, you know, put into the local community. I think that both of these things are great. I don't really see any of the downsides here. Even the downsides that are being proposed, like, oh, you're going to get lower quality tenants. Well, yeah, America's the land of opportunity. You know, we should have the ability to have like, you know, a small Vietnamese family restaurant open in a place that was previously gentrified and made completely unaffordable. You know, like that should be a thing that could happen, right? We shouldn't have to wait 30 years for the entire property value of a given section of a city to fall into complete and utter destruction for that to happen. And like when it comes to housing, yeah, we need more turnover in housing. Like you shouldn't just be able to sit on that forever until like the price value escalates to a point where only millionaires can buy your 1-bedroom studio apartment. I'm looking at you, San Francisco. So I think that these are a good mechanism to put in place as part of a general solution. But I also was just curious about the retail real estate vacancy rate in the United States. We got an idea of the housing vacancy rate in the United States of around 12%, 12.7%, I think, in the study we looked at earlier. But to just real quick, just looked at Statista, my bad. Retail real estate vacancy rates in the United States in the fourth quarter of 2021 and fourth quarter of 2022 by type of property. Just as a quick summary, across different types of retail property in the United States, malls experienced the highest vacancy rate at 8.7% in the fourth quarter of 2022. General retail locations, on the other hand, had a vacancy rate of 2.5%. However, this is across all of the United States. Obviously, there are areas of the United States where retail vacancy is highly concentrated, right? Malls being one of those locations, right? I'm sure almost all of you know of like a dying or dead mall near you, like if you're in America. That being said, it got me thinking, what effect would a vacancy tax have on malls? And I think the answer is that it might be kind of like a death knell for a lot of malls. And that got me thinking, well, what could you do with that? Instead of it just being like all malls just go away, right? What could you do, right? Because instead of it being like a cost of implementing vacancy taxes, how might it be an opportunity, And so that got me thinking, and I looked into this briefly, but turning malls into neighborhoods. This is from Urban Land, and there's this just this longer paper from the Urban Land Institute, turning malls into neighborhoods. From apartment buildings rising in shopping center parking lots to the redevelopment of dead mall sites as housing, retail to residential conversions are an increasing trend. So, I mean, we'll read what we can see here. First paragraph. In the Pentagon City area of Arlington County, Virginia, Pentagon Center is not just a place where people can peruse electronic gadgets at Best Buy, get deals on clothing at Nordstrom Rack and Marshalls, or stock up on everything from paper towels to golf balls at Costco. They can actually live right next to their favorite stores in the Whitmer, a 26-story, 440-unit luxury apartment building that towers over the complex. It's equipped with a state-of-the-art fitness center, a rooftop pool, and other upscale amenities. Plus, it offers the convenience of a location close to both downtown Washington, D.C. and Amazon's East Coast headquarters. So, basically, what I'm trying to get at here is that malls are dying. Vacancy taxes could basically be the thing that kills malls, like the final death blow. But that could actually be an opportunity to convert these malls into mixed residential and business areas, right? Which I think would absolutely be a great thing, right? And we're not just talking about dying like mall complexes, but also strip malls. There are a lot of people seem to be writing about this concept in 2023. Turning a tiny fraction of America's dead strip malls into housing could create 700,000 new apartments, which, you know, that's not all of the apartments we need, but that is a lot of apartments. And again, just a tiny fraction. So what is the fraction here? A new report found that converting 10% of strip malls into housing could create 700,000 new homes. Only 10% of strip malls. Old or vacant strip malls offer a promising opportunity to create much needed new housing. Let's take a look. You've likely heard the US is in the midst of a retail apocalypse. The rise of e-commerce has pushed big box stores into bankruptcy and helped create zombie malls across the country. It doesn't look like the trend will reverse itself anytime soon. At the same time, communities across the country are facing a housing affordability crisis driven by a shortage of homes, which, I mean, a shortage of homes active in the market, which a vacancy tax could solve. Urban planners and developers across the country are pushing a fix for both, converting strip malls into housing. If just 10% of vacant strip malls best suited for redevelopment were turned into housing, it would result in more than 700,000 homes. A new report from housing nonprofit Enterprise Community Partners found. That estimate assumes half the new housing would be lower density multifamily housing and half would be medium density multifamily buildings of up to 6 stories. Opportunities for brick and mortar retail conversions are everywhere in both cities and suburbs. Ahmad Abu Khalaf, a senior research analyst at the Housing Organization and the report's author, told Insider. There are 947.5 million square feet of strip mall space across the U.S., according to the International Council for Shopping Centers, the report notes. Quote, most jurisdictions have at least a couple of dated strip mall properties that are underutilized and that could be redeveloped into housing and affordable housing, or mixed-use developments that have both affordable housing and community-serving spaces. Now, what I find really interesting about this, right? What I find really interesting about this weird. My idea is to buy a dead mall cheap and then turn it into an 80s themed retro go-kart track. What's interesting about this, right, is that this gets a lot closer to what the socialist idea of malls was supposed to be, right? So for those of you who don't know, and I found out about this from a really great article on Jacobin several years ago now. The Shopping Mall's Socialist Prehistory by Sam Wetherell. Okay. Excellent article. When was this published? In 2014. Yeah, so this is almost 10 years old at this point. But basically, going through this, there's a preamble about kind of dead and dying malls. But then we get to this section, which I'm just going to quote in its entirety. The inventor of the American suburban shopping mall, Victor Gruen, was a Viennese architect and socialist forced to flee to the United States after the occupation of Austria in 1938 by the Nazis. Gruen saw the mall as having the potential to re-centralize suburban sprawl. His plans were for large state-owned indoor agoras that would literally contain the market forces that were running rampant outside their walls. It was a modernist vision for the refounding of American public life. Many of the malls built by Gruen and his company in the 1950s retained elements of this premise, with his Southdale Mall in Edina, Minnesota, planned around an enormous common meeting place modeled on a European piazza. By the 1960s, Gruen was horrified by his creations. The shopping mall, along with the freeway and the cheap federally backed mortgage, had become part of the architecture of suburban white supremacy. Gruen returned to Austria in 1968 and furiously worked on a project to pedestrianize Vienna. 2 years after his death in 1980, before his death, not after his death. He didn't release a statement after his death. In 1980, he stated, "I am often called the father of the shopping mall. I would like to take this opportunity to disclaim paternity once and for all. I refuse to pay alimony to those bastard developments. They destroyed our cities." So, first of all, this article is great. You all should read it. Just gonna copy paste it into chat here. But basically here, what we're getting at is that we have a bare concept for, vacancy taxes on shopping malls and businesses and storefronts, right? Shopping malls have businesses and storefronts in them. Many of them are vacant. And by taxing them, that would give them the incentive to sell those off or rent them off at much lower prices, right? And if they are being sold off, I would argue that there may be an incentive for local communities to buy those shopping malls and renovate them into kind of a space that can provide housing and also provide like community events and for the local community, right? Shopping mall, you guys have all seen like videos of like exploring abandoned shopping malls, right? Like there are central areas that can serve as just like hangout spots, local entertaining areas, effectively resurrecting the town center that we used to have in like our public lives. And I think that there's an opportunity here to convert these large establishments into both housing and like economic hubs and also community hubs. I think that you can have all three of these things. You can have, the bottom floor has like your grocery store. It has like a couple local restaurants. Has a couple like things for amenities. We've seen analog horrors, yes. So I think that there's like a really cool opportunity that would come with like the death of just like these gigantic eyesores that are currently blights on America. That through their death, we might see like a rise of new and vibrant living. That I think would be really, really cool. Having now gone through like a lot of the studies on vacancy taxes, I think that like they're a generally pretty good idea. I'm sure that there are bad ways they can be implemented or ineffective ways that they could be implemented. But generally speaking, the literature that we've gone through doesn't seem to show a negative effect outside of like, oh no, more business turnover. Oh no, you have to lower your rents for businesses, or you can't just sit on your rental properties to exploit the workers who are renting your houses. Oh no. All this sounds like just like more socialism from the cultural Marxism, maybe. So anyway, this has been my 2-hour long rant on how I think vacancy taxes are probably a good thing, and also not only should there be vacancy taxes on residential homes, but there should also be a vacancy tax on empty storefronts, and also we should implement them in such a way that it kills malls and allows us to redevelop them into more housing, and also maybe like, again, I have nothing against like mixed business and housing projects. So all of this super good, something to think about, and I don't know, like, comment, subscribe, all those things. This was a huge segment. Let's go. Hope you all have a good day. End of segment. Your idea. So, off-world colonists, you've just been saying like vacancy taxes are destined to spiral into chaos, but again, we went over multiple studies, and that did not seem to be the case. And like, we went over studies on places that have had them implemented for, since the 90s, with a definite decrease in vacancy. We went over a study that went over all of the data in French municipalities from 1999 to 2013. We went over another study that or not study, was it? Oh, we went over the situation and case study of like Vancouver and British Columbia implementing this policy. A lot of the benefits seem to be just good. Like, both on like a local city level and also on like a wider provincial level in the case of Vancouver and British Columbia, and also on like a countrywide level in France. Like, I think that you could make an argument that there's a pretty compelling case for this. Yeah, I was, like, just driving through an area that had empty storefronts and like it's a beautiful neighborhood, right? That I live next to. But like, it's just empty. There are like 3 businesses operating in this area, and it's just like, what these companies have had for lease signs up for like 2 or 3 years now, and it's just like, well, maybe we need policy to address that. I don't think that they would be having those signs up. I don't think these places would be empty if we had a vacancy tax to facilitate the turnover to local businesses. And I know that there are local businesses that would move in and operate in those places, but they don't, because the rents are being kept at a gentrified rate. So we need to have something that reverses gentrification in cases where the gentrifiers pull out, You can see the future. My mom lives in one unit, and the one next door to her, owned by the landlord, has been vacant for the past few months because they're asking too much for too much in rent. Yeah, and to be clear, the data on this policy lowering average rent seems to be very unclear to me, but it does seem to be something that pushes like Airbnbs out of like viability in large urban centers, like at least on a massive scale, right? And on top of that, it also seems to just it seems to increase supply. Not enough, mind you, but I think it is one piece of a larger solution. Yeah, exactly, Shai Halud. Malls, many malls, maybe not necessarily strip malls, but many malls have built-in third places for community. You know, you could like imagine like a building complex that like a 2,000 people can live in, and they have like a local bar. Like there's like a local bar where everyone can hang out, or like a little local library or cafe where people can hang out on the bottom floor. Like I think these are good. Remember one time I looked at a room in a share house. They were asking $450 a week for what was the size of a closet. God. I have a question. What would be your ideas for these old store buildings that are boarded up and probably just used for storage because they are in bad shape and aren't worth it to repair? What would be your ideas for these? Well, I guess it would depend on where are these old store buildings, you know? I guess that would be my question. Because if they're near a residential area, they can be turned into, like, they can be fixed up, turned into like a local game store or like a local like tavern. There are a lot of ideas here. Have you heard about the town in Alaska where the entire population lives in one apartment? Yeah, VCC TV. I love that town. I envision like converting malls into basically larger versions of that town. You know? Oh, Little Morphine Annie. I was just talking about how I miss arcades too, as like a third space for like teens, you know? Imagine having like a little arcade for like kids to hang out on like the bottom floor. But like an actual arcade, not just like a shit one. Because I think like having all of those things maybe built into a community might have the community care about them collectively, you know? Generally, I see them in older downtown areas. They're like the old store corners that have long since closed and would cost too much to bulldoze or repair. I think that when it comes to like old downtown areas, honestly, what I think should happen is that vacancy taxes, again, would increase the turnover rate. You know, if you can't just sit on that old storefront, then you can move all that stuff into a storage area, right? Into like a storage unit. Move your shit into a place that is meant to store things. And then if you want to sell it, then you gotta. If you're a private owner of that old storefront, you gotta fix it up and sell it. Otherwise, you got to be paying that vacancy tax. You know, ideally, it would be sold to someone who wants to try to do something cool with it, like open like a little noodle restaurant or like a Somalian food restaurant. Like there are a lot of different things that could be done with those old storefronts that are just moldering, you know? And I guess the question is which do you care more about? Do you care more about using it as a storage space, in which case you pay the vacancy tax, or do you care more about getting rid of it and then allow someone else to do something with it? There's an arcade close to where I'm at. It's $15 to get in, and the majority of the arcades are free to play. That's so cool. Aided Furball, I like that business model a lot. We could put drone pilot recruiting tables by the entrance. Oh no. I like the idea of community facilities and apartment buildings. Yeah. Imagine dorms, but not just for students. Yeah, dorms, except you have your own toilets. I like that. I like that. I don't want to share toilets and showers. Please. Can you imagine a public kitchen in place of a food court? Just imagine. I mean, I like the idea of like a public kitchen, like if someone wants to cook food for folks in the building. I love that idea. But I don't think that means like the units in the building would just be bereft of kitchens. You know, it's not like the little capsule hotel that conservatives are afraid all residences are going to turn into by 2050 or something. You know. But community kitchens are great. I had one in my dorm building, and it was a great place to like hold a party because like, you know, someone could cook like beans or like a family recipe for like a bunch of people in the building. It was great. Gremlo was watching a video the other day that's a huge argument against a public kitchen. What is the argument against a public kitchen that some people suck ass at cooking? The guy basically makes shrimp and Instamash in an airplane bathroom. How is that an argument against public kitchens? That's just a guy doing something you're not supposed to do in a in an airplane bathroom. Gross. Yeah, learn to cook. Exactly. Generally, oh wait. The hard part is to set it up so people don't isolate themselves like so many apartment complexes. Yeah, and I think the solution to that is like not just like a one large common area, but maybe like a smaller common area on every floor. You know, like one thing I tried to do in my building, and it's just like this idea has just been stuck in my head. There are little like nooks and crannies around my apartment building where there's just a really wide hallway space. And I brought this up as an idea to the people who run my building. It was just like, hey, what if we had like a bookshelf and we set up a couple of chairs in like these little nook areas? You know? Like just have like a little free library for the people in the building, or you could do it on every floor or just on one floor. I think that'd be really nice and cool. You know? And you could basically take that concept and apply it to like little like study areas or like little study areas or like a community like projector room or something. I think that there are things you could do that would facilitate people like showing up. Like if you had like a little like, you know, projector like bolted onto the ceiling or something, you could that like connects via Bluetooth or something. You could have like the community throw like a little movie night once a week or something. I think this would be like really great, you know? There's a lot of there's a lot of upsides to vacancy taxes. I guess is the journey we've been on for the last 2 hours is that vacancy taxes are generally seem to be a very good thing, and we should have them everywhere. And we shouldn't allow people to just sit on empty houses and empty apartments in order to jack the prices up. Hannah Reloaded, thank you so much for the raid. Welcome, Raiders. My name is Riverboat Jack. I talk about the news and politics. And today we've been talking about vacancy taxes, which sound really boring, but aren't boring. They're actually really cool and could be a wider solution to housing housing inaffordability and lack of supply, and also kind of a mechanism to kind of reverse gentrify different areas of urban environments. Yes, this will be a segment on the YouTube channel, by the way, youtube.com/riverboatjack. And yeah, welcome everybody. What'd you guys talk about on Hannah Reloaded today? Also, folks in my community, go give Hannah Reloaded a follow over on Twitch. Wonderful content creator. Talks a lot about conspiracy theory and such. Good stuff. Friggin' awesome. It's true. Lorenzi, thank you for the follow. Girl Clock, thank you for the follow as well. Down with Airbnb? Absolutely. I love that again, I still can't get over like how all of the objections were like, but smaller businesses would be able to open with shorter terms on their leases. Like, yeah, that's what a vacancy tax would do. But think of all the poor building and construction companies that would just have to sit on their units instead of jacking up the prices to $2,000 a month. It's like they could lower the rents that they charge and fill up the building faster, and that would take care of that problem. Won't somebody think of how much money they wanted to make? When will the government think about how much money I wanted to make? Airbnb is such a blight in the city. Upside down smiley face. It really is. It really is. As a nobleman, that is my argument against capitalism. All that economic growth, creating a declassed merchant class. Honestly, anything that incentivizes people to get to know their neighbors would be beneficial. True. Also, I think that we could use, for those of you who are just coming in, I think we could use vacancy taxes to effectively kill most malls and then turn them into mixed residential and business areas, which I think would be incredibly cool. We also looked briefly at an article based on a study that estimates that if like abandoned, dead, or dying strip malls were renovated into housing, it could create 700,000 new homes in America with just 10% of them, which is very cool, and we should do that. I'd love to live in the underground city here. That sounds cool. My goodness. Well, I was going to talk about a couple other topics, but we wound up talking about vacancy taxes for literally 2 hours. So if you guys have enjoyed the content, please hit the follow button on Twitch, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, and hit the like button on the YouTube stream. And please throw some subs or donos at me, because that is what I need to survive. This show literally brought to you by viewers like you. And without your support, I would surely perish. Let's see. What do we have time to talk about? Often more tightly than restaurant because people check if you wash your hands, where you're hitting at and such, because they eat that food too. True. Yeah, just imagine I feel like one of the ways you could really bring like a large community together in like a residential cooking area is just like, you know, how to cook like different ethnic dishes that you might not be familiar with, you know? I feel like food really brings people together. Like arcologies from Shadowrun? Yeah. But like, or like the Mega Habs from Judge Dredd, but like not shitty and dystopic. I see, Priscilla, instead of saying cyberpunk nightmare, I like to remind everyone that malls were originally a socialist invention, and what we're proposing here is not the dystopian image, but instead a return to the original conceptualization of what malls should be. You know, the solar punk dream. True. How about communities built of natural materials by the future occupants? Homes of cob, adobe, daub, and wattle. I mean, depends on if they're up to code, I guess. We got right. No, we've actually been talking about vacancy taxes, but the conversation has evolved. Yeah, Priscilla, I linked an article earlier in chat from Jacobin, but it goes over the history of malls. Created by a socialist who had to flee Austria in 1938. Paladin lost!
Let's get some BWA going. BWAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHAHll I really appreciate it. Thank you. Y'all. Love those too. Yeah, I hadn't really ever thought in depth about vacancy taxes, so we went on like a research rabbit hole about their efficacy and such. Also, folks, I do have to run in order to pick up my partner from work and then do dinner, but I will be back later tonight, probably with like a chill game stream after we talk about the IDF's propaganda campaign, where they basically decided to do Abu Ghraib, but try and spin it as a good thing. So, yeah, come back for that, I guess. And please hit the follow button. Hope I see you all again if you're a newcomer here, because I do like seeing you. What you cooking? We might cook some chicken marsala. So I'm excited for tasty food, or we might have leftovers. We'll see. Drive safe in my newly fixed car. Thanks to you guys, I will. At least until the brakes die. But hopefully that won't happen for 6 months to a year. All right. Bye. We're going to raid you guys along into Rockoka. Thank you very much for subscribing. I'm going to raid you all into Dylan Burns. He did a good job debating Destiny the other day. Maybe we'll watch that debate as well later. Also, Salmon Moose is offering to host movie night over on the Discord immediately after stream. So if you guys would like to hop into the Discord and watch some movies with Salmon Moose, please you join the Discord, ! Discord in chat, and join the movie time voice chat with your mic muted, and let's go. I will see you all later. Bye.